Great. Everything is here in person. We're going to just do a quick name, where you're from. We'll start with you, Brian. Go around the room.
Good morning, Brian Kroll with Trans Systems Gannon Fleming.
Christopher Blackwell, Penn Hills Planning Department.
My name is Greg Morris, and I'm an interested citizen who lives in Mount Lebanon.
Hello, Courtney Meredith. You with Friends of the River.
I am Kelly Tigan with the National Park Service Rivers Trails and Conservation Assistance Program.
Alexandra Long with the Pennsylvania Environmental Council.
Roy Wild, Freedom Volunteer Fund.
Becky Butler, Washington State.
Savannah Grooms, Washington Planning.
Presenting Mobilify Southwestern PA.
Elijah Yellow, SPC.
Calling Shad, SPC.
I was Evan Shaw, SPC.
Chuck and Brian, SPC.
Charles, SBC. Seth Davis, Pittsburgh Regional Transit, Manager of Corridor Planning and the Mount Lebanon Interested Citizen.
Great to check PRT.
Kristen Saunders, with Tool Design. Nancy Hirsch with SPC.
Chris Corbran with the Pennsylvania Environmental Council.
Lisa Brown with Watersheds of South Pittsburgh.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Anthony Hickton. I'm our manager at TDM here at SPC. And I wanted to take a moment, Leanne and myself and Julia, we're all within the TDM area. Leanne specialty, obviously, with active transportation. But at SPC, most of you probably know Lily. Lily has been appointed our new Director of Transportation. I want to take the opportunity to introduce her to everyone. Lily, out of your deck.
Hi, everyone. Really, this is a great actually comment. Oh, thanks. Oh, is it my time? All right. All right. So again, yeah, thank you guys. I know December is a very hectic month, so this is awesome to see. Really excited for our team here. This is great. So I'm just going to quickly do a brief overview of our Complete Streets policy, which I hope most of you are aware passed at our October commission meeting. It was officially adopted by the SPC Commission. Leanne has been working on this policy in collaboration with our partners, which I know includes many of you, for several months. So this is very exciting for us. Complete Streets, and I'm sure you all know this definition, but I'm going to say it for the record anyway. Complete Streets is an approach to planning, designing, building, and operating streets in an equitable and context-sensitive manner to prioritize safety, comfort, and connectivity to destinations for everyone who uses the street network. So as part of the adoption of this policy, SPC will screen all applicable projects seeking funding through SPC-administered competitive funding programs for adherence to Complete Streets policy. Or in other words, the accommodation of all existing users of the roadway network from construction through project completion. And Ryan Gordon and I, in our Transportation and Planning Department, will provide more information on how this will specifically be scored and adopted into that before the next round of competitive programs, which will open in next year, 2025. So thank you. That's all I have.
All right. Thanks so much for sharing that. That's great news, and it's definitely a great way to kick off today's sport. So now I'm at the pleasure of introducing our first speaker, Tony Seaports. Lana is a low mission carry, one driver, and author of When Driving is an Option. Lana created the Week Without Driving Challenge, which led to sponsor or participate in earlier this year, as a way to help people experience and understand the barriers and low drivers face in car-dependent society. Lana's leadership extends across multiple organizations and initiatives. She serves on the boards of the Leader Bicyclists, the Pacific Northwest Transportation Consortium, and the Washington State Transportation Innovation Council. She also serves as a member of the TRB Committee on Public Health and Transportation and the National Aging and Disability Transportation Center Coordinating Committee. Her work highlights her passion for bringing voices of non-drivers to the planning and policymaking tables. Today, Anna will share her unique perspective on how designing transportation systems with non-drivers who can help create more accessible, sustainable. This week's and one of Rentley's are STB's after transportation and enhancement. And please send out her to lead us essentially. But thanks for being here and for you.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I am also wondering if it's going to work for me to share slides. I'm assuming it'll work for the folks online. For the folks in the room, Is that feasible? Let me go ahead and try and see what happens. Oh dear. Having some permission questions here. Hang on one second. Oh, you know what? Do you guys mind if I rejoin really quick? It's asking me to restart my program in order to have permission to do that.
I'm just, I actually just made you presenter, so see if you can try again. So that might have been it.
Okay, yeah, I think it's my system is actually asking me to restart.
Okay.
I'll be right back. I'm really sorry about this.
About all these hybrid meetings, right? From the two, so that us hours. Just as yeah,
Congrats, Lily.
Thank you.
Just
I've been in the position for about a month. Yeah, but I've been at SPC for 6.5 years.
It's just got to the holidays. How
But give you more credit that I get in this win.
really stuff.
Yeah, so I'm really busy time of year.
I have a house, so I have
Travel time.
I want to help.
flags, flat,
Oh, it's a guest cab.
have salads, what bigger crowds.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't it? You know,
Go full.
Yeah, but I kind of thanks the crowd.
It's like
I am back. Let me know if you can see and
Sir.
Ran back.
can you see my slides?
Yes.
yes.
Yes, wonderful. All right, you can hear me all right.
Yes.
Yay, that's wonderful. Sorry, it's been a long time since I've used WebEx. I feel like during the pandemic I was using it all the time, and now it's been a hot minute. So apologies for those technical difficulties. It's really lovely to be here with you all this morning. I am calling in from Seattle, Washington, where it's still quite dark. And so my kid is off to school though, so the house is quiet. So that's great. On the screen, you'll see this is an image of my book, When Driving is Not an Option, Steering Away from Car Dependency, which was published by Island Press in May this year. And it talks about the experiences of people who can't drive and can't afford to drive, and people who choose not to drive throughout our country. So just to sort of give you a little context of where this book came from and why I wrote it, the image on the back of the screen is the road where I grew up in Washington State. It's outside of our state capital, so it's in a rural area. It's a very it's a small rural road, no sidewalks, no transit, tall trees, and this is where I grew up. And I was born with an eye condition called nystagmus that makes my eyes shake all the time, just a little bit. And what that means is that I don't see well enough to drive a car. I tried as a teenager to pass the vision test at the DMV. I failed. I tried to learn how to drive anyway. I got in a car accident in my friend's car when she was teaching me without permission from my parents how to drive. And so after those experiences, I really realized that driving was never going to be an option for me. And I needed to figure out how to live and be part of a community where I didn't have to drive. And so that's when I moved to New York City. I spent about 15 years living in New York City, where the transit options were really reliable, where a large percentage of the population didn't drive anyway. And my disability was less of a barrier to having jobs, to having friends, to being engaged in the community. But then I had a kid in 2016, and I decided to move back to Washington State to be closer to families. And so this book is really inspired by the work that I started to do working at Disability Rights Washington in Washington State, and getting to know many other disabled folks and folks who are aging out of driving and folks who couldn't afford to drive, and recognizing that there were really more people out there that are largely invisible in our conversations about transportation planning, who really don't have the option of driving. So I want to just pause for a moment and ask you all to think about. Oh, I feel like I'm getting a little feedback here. Let me know if you can't hear me. I want you to think about the people that you know in your own life who can't drive or can't afford to drive or choose not to own a car. And if that's you, what your own experiences of not being able to drive are like. And maybe there's been a point in your life, when you were too young to drive, or when you had an injury, or when you couldn't afford a vehicle. Thinking about who you know in your social circle who can't drive. Maybe that's someone in your family, maybe that's someone on your block, someone in a community group or a church. And thinking about how they get around. How do they get their daily needs met? How do they get groceries? How do they go shopping? How do they go to medical appointments? How do they meet friends? And this image on the screen is from the bus. This is outside of Austin, Texas. And there's some other folks waiting for the bus at a bus stop. And so I think, when we think about our communities, we often sort of assume that everyone who needs to go places can drive there. But the reality is that there are many, many people in all of our communities, even in rural communities, who can't drive or can't afford to drive. And once we start to think about them and notice them, people waiting at the bus stop, the paths that are worn in the grass, whether in the sidewalk where people are walking, which they don't have an option of driving, we start to really think about our transportation system differently. So I will leave that thought with you, and maybe at the end, if people want to share about the non-drivers in your lives, I'd love to hear that. And get to what I want to talk about here is some of the different categories of non-drivers, and recognizing that these are often intersecting categories, overlapping categories, and that even the sort of title or label of non-driver isn't a strict binary. That there are, there are gradations of driving access and mobility. So one big group of non-drivers, and this is the sort of the center, the heart of this book, is people who can't drive because of disabilities. There's an image here in the upper left of the screen of Erica, who's a power chair user and lives in Seattle. And to sort of, get into these nuances of disability of driving, for some people like me who are low vision, driving is just not safe. Like I am a non-driver. I will always be a non-driver. For Erica, she can drive, but she can't afford a vehicle that accommodates her power wheelchair. And so if she, she actually has a car and she can drive places in her car, but she can't get out of her vehicle and go anywhere. And so, if she's going to go into a store or go into a restaurant or go into a doctor's appointment, she needs to take transit. And so understanding that there's these levels of complexity and access that are often related to income and, for people who can afford Ubers or Lyfts everywhere and live in a big city where those, services are available, perhaps not driving isn't as big of a barrier as for someone who, lives in a rural area, is a wheelchair user and can't use Uber or Lyft anyway. They couldn't afford those services even if they existed. So there are all kinds of disabilities that can prevent driving or make driving unsafe or uncomfortable. Right? We talked about people who have mobility disabilities, vision disabilities, neurological disabilities, traumatic brain injuries, epilepsy. So like every time I talk to different community groups about non-drivers, I hear different experiences from experiences that I hadn't even considered. I think one piece of the experience that we often overlook is the anxiety that driving can cause for some folks, and such severe anxiety that driving is not possible or is really uncomfortable and something that people try to avoid. And there's all kinds of causes for that. Perhaps it's post-traumatic stress from a crash. Veterans who have served in Iraq and in the Middle East, and so the IEDs. I've heard a lot of stories of that where people are really traumatized from the risks around driving that they experienced in war. There's and so recognizing that not all disabilities are visible, and not all disabilities are fixed either. You could have a chronic health condition that, or a mental health condition where some days or some weeks driving is feasible and other days and other weeks it's just not. And you need other ways to get around because you still need to go places. There's also many people who are aging out of driving who would not in any way consider themselves disabled. And I include a picture of my grandma here on the bottom left, who is someone who, drove. She lived in a rural part of southern Indiana her whole life on a farm. And then she developed a heart condition where she would lose consciousness unexpectedly. And she continued to drive even with this heart condition, even though it wasn't safe. She would pass out and drive off the road. And luckily lived in an area that was rural enough where she never hurt herself and she never hurt anyone else when this happened. But definitely not an ideal situation for her to continue to drive. But she really didn't want to have to give up, and leave the farm that she loved and the animals that she loved and move into an assisted living facility. And that is the case for so many folks in our country who are aging out of driving and don't have options where they live to stay in place, to stay in their homes if they can't drive. We also have, many non-drivers can't afford to drive. And I think we saw this very clearly in the pandemic when the bus ridership in areas of where there's a lot of low-income families, a lot of immigrant families, a lot of communities of color, those bus riders, those essential workers often remained on transit, even when transit felt like a risky, place to be. And there's an image here in the middle of folks on the bus in Seattle on one of the routes that did serve many low-income communities where, the transit ridership maintained on this route because people didn't have other options. We also have people who are, too young to drive. There's an image here of my kid and another kid on our block waiting for the school bus. People under the age of 16, people who are not yet eligible for driver's licenses, are a big piece of non-drivers as well. And I think it's important to include them when we talk about non-drivers rather than separating them out into their own category. Their needs and the needs of children are similar to the needs of everyone else in our community. They need to go places too. They have activities to participate in, doctor's appointments to go to. And we can't always assume that there's a parent or guardian who has access to a car and can drive in every house. And so we need to design systems where kids have the opportunity, no matter what, to fully participate. And that's why we have our school bus system, right? We recognize that it's important for kids to be able to get to school. And then finally, on this bottom right, are people who are, old enough to drive, perhaps could afford to drive, physically can drive, mentally, have the ability to drive, but are choosing not to drive. And increasingly, the Gen Z and other young people, and these are high school students waiting for the bus in Seattle, but are choosing not to drive. And a lot of that may be economic reasons, the high cost of driving, the high cost of insurance, but also other reasons as well, climate reasons, the stress of driving, and so recognizing that there are people who choose not to drive for a whole host of reasons, and they are also part of this fund. So altogether, non-drivers in the U.S. make up about a third of the population. And this includes children, this includes seniors, this includes disabled folks, this includes folks who are unlicensed, have suspended licenses, who are choosing not to drive, who can't afford cars. 31 out of every 100 residents in the U.S. does not have a driver's license. And then we have a bit more detailed information for some states. I don't have this for Pennsylvania, but in Washington State, we had our school design and was hired by our state legislature to do a study on driving access and found that 30% of the population here in Washington State are non-drivers. Wisconsin found a similar percentage, 31%. Their DOT did a study on this as well. And I mentioned earlier, but this is an image of, a lack of sidewalk, but where the side of the road, the dirt has been worn, the grass has been worn away down to the dirt because people are walking here. And so, just thinking when we start to look and when we start to really think about who has car access, we start to see, the visible signs of this large percentage of non-drivers that exist in all of our communities. So I just want to talk real quickly, and then I'll take questions about some of the ways non-drivers get around, and some of the things we could do to make access more possible for more of us, to build more inclusive communities. The first is that in Washington State, and this is what we found in the study that was conducted by our legislature, and we hear this as well, right? But that in most places in the U.S., because our communities are so car dependent, the easiest way to get somewhere if you can't drive is to ask someone who can drive or does have access to a car to drive you. But this comes with a cost, an emotional burden, or when you ask someone for a ride, you owe them. So there's an image here of Jaime Torres, who's a non-driver from Washington State, who describes, it is beyond frustrating to have to depend on others for transportation. It really affects me to the point where it's easier just to isolate myself in my room so I don't feel like a burden. Just reflecting in your own life, when the last time you asked for a ride was, what that felt like, did you feel like you owed someone, and understanding that for non-drivers, asking for rides always feels like that, right? That it's always an ask and a negotiation, and so there are many trips that get not taken as a result of it, and often the trips that would allow people to feel fully included and social in their community. Transit access, when it's available, really is freedom. And there's an image here of Abby Griffith, who's a non-driver from Washington State, who describes the joy that she felt when she was able to move from a rural area with no transit into a city that has transit. And just, the joy she felt being able to go to the grocery store independently, to meet friends. So thinking about in your own communities where transit goes, where does it not go, what hours it runs, when does it not run, and what your experience is like waiting for transit, transferring between transit systems, and if it doesn't exist, what other options are available. We'll play this video. Ooh, you know what? I think I'll skip that video for now. I'll share the link with you all, but sometimes it's a little chunky over the internet to play videos. So that's a video of someone in a rural area describing, the importance of transit, even in rural areas, in rural communities. The other piece that I want to highlight is that the importance of thinking about sidewalks as part of the transit network. Because if you can't get to that transit stop, or that transit stop isn't a safe or comfortable place to wait, then that transit becomes unavailable to you. So there's some images here. The first one is of Tanisha Sepulveda, who's a power chair user in Seattle, rolling down a street because the sidewalk doesn't have curb ramps, and has big cracks and bumps. And she describes, what it's like, for her to be yelled at because she's in the street, which is something that happens to her a lot. There's also some images of a very snowy sidewalk, not getting plowed. That can definitely decrease access, especially for people in wheelchairs or people with other kinds of disabilities that snow becomes super, super treacherous and slippery. And then the middle image here is of people in a rural area of Washington State waiting for a bus on a street without sidewalks and where the bus stop is loose gravel. And if you're in a wheelchair, like this woman Kat is, you can't pull into that loose gravel because you'll get stuck. And so she's waiting out in the middle of this rural road waiting for a bus, which is not, a safe or comfortable place to be. So just reflecting in your own communities, where are there missing sidewalks? Where are there unsafe crossings? What is it like to try to catch that bus? What does it feel like to be waiting, at a particular stop? And at the end of the day, right, we can have great transit, we can have safe and accessible pedestrian networks and crossings, but if the places that we need to get to are far from where we go, it becomes harder and harder to access them without vehicles. And so thinking about, in our rural communities, what are the options for accessing medical care, for accessing groceries, for accessing pharmacies? There's some images here. This is the town I mentioned my grandmother earlier. This is the town that she lived in, that's still connected to her family. And, in the 50s and 60s and, before then, there was a grocery store, there was a pharmacy. After the highway got built, and there's an image of the highway getting built there happened in the late 60s, all of those businesses went out of business because everyone was able to drive into the next nearest town about 40 miles away for shopping. And so for people who couldn't drive, they lost access. And so recognizing that it's important not only to make sure that people have access to transportation, but also that the things we need are close enough for us to access even without cars. So finally, as far as recommendations for change, we can make all of these, we can build better transit, we can make sure we have sidewalks, we can make sure we have services near where people live, housing near services. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we have people in decision-making positions, seated at tables like the table you are all at today, who have the experience of being non-drivers. Whether that's a current experience or a recent experience or even a memory of, right? Understanding what some of the challenges are to navigating the community without without access to a vehicle. And so in Washington State, some of the changes that we're seeking right now through my work at Disability Rights Washington, one is to change the makeup of our transit boards to add voting seats for people who are transit riders. Because right now the only seats are for elected officials, and often those people don't ride transit and perhaps have never ridden transit, and yet they're making decisions about our transit system. The other piece of legislation we're working on right now mirrors legislation that was passed this year in California and was passed in 2021 in the state of Oregon that requires if an employer is going to post a job posting that requires a driver's license, then driving needs to actually be an essential function of that job. Because right now we see a lot of jobs in the transportation sector, transit planning jobs or ADA coordinator jobs. In the picture here of an ADA coordinator job that required a driver's license. And then what that does is exclude people who can't drive or have, don't have access to a car from applying and being eligible for these jobs. So I mentioned the importance of experiencing travel as a non-driver. There's an image here of some folks waiting for the bus, and a quote from Ivan Nova who talks about how elected leaders really don't have that experience themselves of waiting in the rain for a bus or just missing a bus because the light timing is really long. And so we also created the Week Without Driving Challenge, which I know you all participated in Pennsylvania and know a little bit about. So I won't go into too much detail here. That really, helps elected leaders and other decision makers understand that day in and day out experience of navigating their communities without access to a vehicle. So it just wrapped up this fall, and we are getting ready for the Week Without Driving next year, which I don't have the dates off the top of my head right now, but that first week of October. And you can learn more at weekwithoutdriving.org. I'm going to paste this video in the chat as well. This is another video featuring some TV highlights from Week Without Driving this year. And then I'll go ahead and take. So there's my social media too, if you want to follow along and be in touch there. But I'd love to hear your questions and comments. And if you have experiences a week without driving, would love to hear those. If you have experiences of non-drivers in your communities, whether that's yourself or other people I would also love to hear those. And
Should be. Too. I get up. All right. Thanks so much for presenting on your perspective on it. We appreciate that. Anyone have any questions from any comments or stories from your experience without driving?
And we should probably just, if you project.
So I just want to highlight one element. There are some folks here from Mount Lebanon, and Mount Lebanon is a walking school district, but does not have sidewalks on every street. Mount Lebanon is also, this is not news, but relatively affluent community. There is a larger socioeconomic mix, but the fact that there aren't sidewalks on every street is an exclusionary boundary. There's a new development in Mount Lebanon, Castlegate Green, which is a fantastic development on its face, but it does not have sidewalks to its nearest school. It'd be a 2-mile walk. So that I always want to speak to this linkage of zoning and as well as infrastructure, and Mount Lebanon is well overdue for a zoning update, and just highlight that element. I think we see that across Allegheny County. Craig Tuchek, my colleague at PRT, has mapped this in Allegheny County. Some of the challenges at every bus stops is we provided a TAPE score, a transit access improvement score, and it's based on equity. It's based on need, based on a Google Maps review. We used SPC's input or SPC's data to input into that and really get to go to the next level. It's a difficult thing for PRT to manage, but we're happy to share that and work together to kind of close these gaps throughout the county and beyond. So just a comment, but thank you, Anna. I really appreciate following your story.
I'm just curious, was there pushback on having non-electeds on the transit board? Or was that a fair?
Yeah, very much so. So we've actually been working on this piece of legislation now. This will be our third legislative session try to get it passed. There is pushback. I think from the transit agencies themselves, some cases, which is interesting. I think, part of the challenge is that we do have some transit boards that are actually anti-transit, and I've been working to try to cut taxes from a sort of, reducing tax perspective, but that would eliminate Sunday service and other services, right? And so it's tricky because, in situations like that where you have people on a board that are trying to reduce the transit service, without actually understanding, the impact or, feeling themselves the impact of what that would mean, say, to not to be able to go anywhere on a Sunday. But no, it has been controversial, and I think questions about what how community members would be selected. Are they how does fiduciary responsibility work? But we do have one transit board in our state that has had community members, 3 community members as part of the board since the 70s. They were grandfathered in under our current legislative sort of statute around transit boards, and it works great for them. And they often, the community members end up being the chair. And so we think some of the concerns are a little overblown. And this, yeah. So happy to share more. I can paste a link in the chat too from an article we wrote last year about the process, and we're working on a new one that talks about how the community members actually work pretty well on the one transit board that doesn't currently.
That's a question from have their hand raised.
Yeah, this is Seth Bush, the advocacy manager at Pittsburgh. Anna, you and I got to meet on a walk audit at the Active Transportation Summit earlier this year. We had such a good time out there in Pennsylvania. Yeah, and I just wanted to say thanks again for this great presentation and really being an inspiration for Pittsburgh to take on, and Allegheny County to take on Week Without Driving this year. Bike Pittsburgh to collaborate with Pittsburghers for Public Transit and AARP and Access Mob Pittsburgh. And then I think we had over 50 nonprofits and organizations, many, multiple elected officials, including some from Mount Lebanon and City of Pittsburgh, and our mayor and our county executive. And I think well over 250 people who signed on to participate in the pledge. And I think it was a great first year. I look forward to doing it again next year, even bigger and better, and encourage everybody in the room and on the call today to participate in Week Without Driving next year. Our website is still up, weekwithoutdrivingpgh.org, if you want to take a look, everybody, at what we accomplished this past year. And thank you, Anna, for being such an inspiration, and hope we can do it bigger and better next year.
Oh my God. I just want to say you guys are amazing. I saw, some press stories, and I think there's a couple of clips from Pittsburgh in that video I just posted, which we haven't shared publicly yet. But it's TV highlights, from around the country. So clips from one of the press conferences that you all put together that were just terrific. So Pittsburgh was a standout for us just nationally. Thanks for all your work. And
Yeah, so we have the question here in the chat for you from Rob to Corte. I'm not able to speak, so I'm writing my question. The anticipated start of mass use of vehicles will increase non-motorized ridership. Do you think this will shift the focus back to motorized ridership at the expense of non-motorized transportation?
yeah, I am concerned about the impacts of autonomous vehicles on land use choices, right? And if it becomes cheaper and less time consuming for folks to drive places, what that will mean as far as sprawl and things being further apart. And then if you say can't afford or can't access an autonomous vehicle because they're not wheelchair accessible, or just the cost is prohibitive, what that will mean for access for community members. So yeah, I actually had the chance to ride a Waymo for the first time in Tempe. I was there for a book event, and I was surprised. It was the first time I've ever been in a vehicle by myself, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is really nice." I can see why this is attractive, but I think that's part of the problem too, right? that this deduction of that for people who can afford it or access it will result in more car dependent communities, which I think is not ultimately what we want. But we think about, how we want to spend our time or the kinds of places we want to live in.
Right. Another question from the chat. Is there a strategy or a model policy for moving utility poles out of the sidewalks and non-drivers reclaim Greatway? George.
Oh my gosh, that is a great question. I know it is such a fight and it's so expensive, right? I know there's a particular sidewalk that we've been trying to get built in Tacoma, Washington. Crystal Monteros, who's one of the advocates who's been working with us for a long time, lives in, it's this whole area of low-income apartment complexes and bus stops, and then like bus stops that aren't connected to sidewalks because there's not the right of way because of these utility poles. And so, we've been pushing to get these sidewalks built, but the price tag is so excessive because it requires moving the utility poles. So, one thing that I think in this particular situation we've been asking for is rather than moving the utility poles, which is going to be prohibitively expensive, can we move the curb, which is also expensive, right? But can we extend the road itself would be less lanes. There's not the need for as much road space as there is. And so if you were to extend the curb, then, the sidewalk wouldn't have to be right where the utility poles are. But I know that's obviously not a solution everywhere. And also takes a lot of money. The cost of sidewalk infrastructure, that's a hard one. Even in a city like Seattle with, as much wealth as this, exists here because of all the tech money. When we added up, we were pushing for more sidewalks to get built and sidewalk improvements in our next transportation levy, which just passed. And when we added it all up, the total cost for missing sidewalks and, and sidewalks repairs was $5 billion just for the city of Seattle. Which is a huge number, right? And not something we can come up with, with our current tax structure. So, yeah, that's a big challenge. And getting the chat to see if there's anything else. Well, I'll also paste my contact info in the chat too. And if there's other questions or anything, feel free to reach out. I will give you my work email here.
Okay. All right, we have no other questions. Thanks again. I know we really do appreciate your time here and the inspiration and motivation. Thank you.
Thank you all. Take care.
And we'll move on to our next presentation, which will be an update on the Bob Trail by Chris Blackwell and Brian Kroll. You can use the mic if you need it.
I don't know.
You don't need for an
Now I gotta be able to look at the PowerPoint so I know what to talk about. My name's Christopher Blackwell. I'm the planning director at Penn Hills. I've been there approximately 30 years, over 30 years. And I have to say, like, this is an extremely exciting project. This Verona Oakmont Penn Hills Trail connector has been, of my career, it's been, one of the greatest things I'm working on, and it's not even completed yet. But really recreation, I would say my most successful project was a skate park about 20 years ago. I still get accolades for that. But as I said, I've been here 30 years. Ryan and I, we went to the coffee shop across the street. This used to be a Society of Contemporary Craft. It was an museum last year. And then, we were talking about, there's a lot of change from, I haven't been in this area in quite a while, from Rosebud, Metropole, from those good and loud, so Brian, now rather to see like that, this place is changed. But anyway, Brian.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. I'm Brian Kroll with Trans Systems again at Fleming. And we've been working on this project for it's been about a year and a half. so we started, and Chris will get into it, with a feasibility study in Verona, and then we worked our way on to about this 13-mile project. So,
What we have here is our next slide is about our steering committee, and this is a multimodal, multi-municipal, multi-use trail that's going to go from Allegheny River around Steel City, Raleigh to Boyce Park. And as a result, the steering committee is huge. We have like 40 people on there. So you have,
we're 60 now.
it's 60, yeah. So we have, I got to change my pockets. So, but we have 4 communities. We have elected officials, residents, recreation board members, but we're also dealing with Pittsburgh Regional Transit, PennDOT, LaMagna Cheese, American Beverage, all these, the railroad, Carload Express, and then you've got Friends in the Riverfront, great partners. And of course, Jay Costa, Joe McAndrew. So, there's a lot of activity, a lot of interest in this, and we've got a lot of momentum. And, this is a great turnout today. I'm really pleased. We weren't sure if we were going to be virtual, and then I think Courtney made us realize, look, it's actually in person last night. But we have, like, as Brian said, there's 60 people on this committee, and it sounds like I used to say 40 people and 30 should, but we have monthly meetings, and it's extremely well attended, really well attended. And I think that it just says a lot about the project and the interest in the project. We're proud to be a part of.
We'll have to add, I'll give a plug. I know Mike Pittsburgh's on. We've included them over the past several months just for some of their technical guidance and expertise. It's another one we'll have to add.
So I'm going to talk a little bit. I can go back to 1851 to the founding of Penn Hills. We don't have much time today, and I don't want to bore you. But I actually have a guy that comes to the council meeting and actually starts at 1851, pretty much bluntly. But early studies, we did a feasibility study, and it was completed in 2020 for this trail. And let me back up a little bit. In 2000, we went from Steel City, Raleigh, same location. We were trying to go to the zoo with some of the same members that are on the steering committee today. So we were trying to go from Steel City, Raleigh to the zoo. And there really wasn't the interest, a lot of activity. Three Rivers Heritage Trail on the other side of the river. And so we were working with the county. Dollar Cavada said, hey, sit back and wait. We're not ready for this at this time. So fast forward like 15 years, you get a call from Darla. She reached out to Tom Bland, myself, and said, hey, could you put the team back together? And could we start this effort again? But this time we want to go from the exact location, Steel City, Raleigh to Boyce Park. So yes, we did. We received an Active Allegheny grant for a feasibility study that was completed in 2020. And then the Redevelopment Authority of Allegheny County under Rich Fitzgerald's office, the county executive, had the Trail Development Fund. They had $22 million to allocate to various trail projects. And we applied for that. I applied for that. And I had the little piece of Penn Hills, a couple $100,000. And I also applied for the full about $1.2 million for the design and engineering, entire 13 miles. And we got it, So this has been extremely fast. We've been working extremely fast. And Brian and I, the first time we were here, I don't know if how many of you were here, we spoke in March of 2023, and it was like we just started out. We were beginning, I think we might have had like 1% of the project completed. I think his first invoice was $3,900 or $3,960, and then now we're at, we've expended about 80% of the funds, and we've worked on this for about 2 years, and we've come a long way. And I think part of the issues with us has been, I'm writing grants, I'm preparing grants and writing for grants, and going, Brian, like, I need this information, I need the study, and he's going, no, but we're not supposed to be done yet. Like, we really were pushing this momentum, and but it's as you'll see in a little bit, it really is paid off.
I think that's it.
But I think one of the things that even Anna's presentation is the presentation that Brian and I have done has changed over the year, over this time. And really in the beginning we were talking about technical things and railroad right-of-ways and like I said, this is on-road, off-road, railroad right-of-way, things like that. And our narrative has really changed the connectivity. It's the realization that there are, along this trail, there's 10 parks. There's multiple little communities that, in Penn Hills, it's Milltown, these small communities
And at one time, that railroad served these communities are there because the railroad was there. So there's industry, there were things along the railroad that are no longer there. And but we started to realize connectivity. If you're familiar with Penn Hills at all, Holton Road, there's a little mobile home park. There's a couple of apartment buildings, Holton Arbors, Holton Estates, that are really stranded. They're really there's no connectivity there. And to go from Oakmont, say the business district, to that mobile home park, it takes time. Like when I take people on a tour, we go to Oakmont, and then because you get in the car and you drive like 5 minutes to get to this little mobile home park, and on the trail it's 3/4 of a mile. Like it's the connected world. So the trail, you start talking about the connectivity, how we're bringing recreation to the doorsteps of these residents, but also like the idea of not having to need a car to go downtown. I mean, not downtown, sorry, but the Oakmont, to some of these places. And then, early on, we started talking about the distances. You start getting in your mind, wow, like Verona Municipal Building's 1 mile 1, and then Oakmont, Dark Hall, it was mile 2, and Hills Park is mile 3. And so it's kind of interesting, the connectivity that we've learned. And then you'll see as you go to the next slide, like there's regional trail systems like Three Rivers Heritage Trail. These are the parks that it goes through. I keep saying 10, I think it's 9 on this list. And then if you go to the next one, Brian and I have been going to lunch every month for 2 years at a different restaurant along the trail, right? So and I think we repeated one time, but so it's those kind of things are really, really important. That the activity, and we it's restaurants, we meet for lunch, but there's a lot of different things along this trail that I would say a big part of this, as Chris was alluded to earlier, we had about 3 to 4 public meetings, and we were getting into the technical details, and we switched course to really sell the trail to the public. And that's why we take a lot of time going over these benefits, which I think help with the general public.
Yeah. Then Courtney is in the audience, and she actually wrote this, so I got to be careful about this. But the president prepared these slides for us, and I think as you go through them, again, it's what are the benefits of the trail, and it's economic development, health, transportation. Courtney.
Tax revenue, political earnings, all that. And we can provide the link to you guys after to send out to the this was just completed in May of this year.
This was just completed in May, it's really interesting information and really important information. And it's kind of funny. It goes back to what, like, on the one hand, we want to tell people there are going to be so many users, everybody's going to be using the trail. But then when you're talking to residents, other people are kind of like, wow, like they're worried about all this traffic going past their house, and it's an interesting trying to say no, it's going to provide all this economic development, but it's not going to interrupt your privacy, things like that. But and here we talk about recreation and health, transportation, and then here we get to our trail limits.
Yeah, and actually we just have one location map. Chris will go through this, but because there's 13 miles, we have to have 3 or 4 slot in a location map.
And I think when you look at this, like it starts out in Verona and Steel City Road on road, and it kind of reminds me. We used to think early on in this project, we were like, oh man, Verona's going to be easy. It's all on road. It's just striping. There's no right of way to acquire. I'll tell you what. You start talking in traffic light. They're taking a lane, railroad crossing, but it's also really helped us as far as gaining partners. So like I mentioned, Pittsburgh Regional Transit. So, when we have meetings when Brian and I meet with Pittsburgh Regional Transit or PennDOT or American Beverage, what we're doing is we're bringing to them and we're saying, and I think this is the lesson for doing this kind of project, we say, what can we do for you in this project? It's a $20 million trail, right? Overall. What can we bring to you? So talking to Pittsburgh Regional Transit, you realize the bus stop, you think it's this thing that was all prepared. No, it's this legacy bus stop. It's been there forever. Where the bus stops, the back of the bus is in the intersection. So they're saying, can you move the intersection? Can you move the bus stop? Can you make it accessible? Yeah, we can do that. American Beverage, we're going to take a lane. Tractor trailers right now drive into the oncoming traffic to get out of American Beverage. So widen their entrance. So the railroad, we all know, railroads and trails don't always
get along so well. But we have members of Carlo Express on our trail committee, and it's been very helpful. We met with the railroad down. They're putting a new railroad crossing. So whether it's a traffic light, a railroad crossing, a bus stop, how can we help assist and make it better? How can we improve that railroad crossing? Are there things that we can do to make it better? So that's when you start to kind of change the conversation with the different partners and actually make them partners. And then they're interested in coming on and being part of these meetings. So we start out in Verona and we're on road, and then and then it comes along, and this is what I was talking about. You can see these traffic lights. We're talking about taking a lane, and we go on to Plum Street right into Oakmont, into Creekside Park. It continues, and you can see this is like I said, this is a mile 2, mile 3, and you really can start to put in your mind about how this trail is going to work. People think about Penn Hills and they go, man, how are you going to up those hills? How are you going to get up that hill? No, the railroad followed the river, and it's basically flat. It's a creek. So it's things like that. It's pretty interesting. And then I always say, like, when we get out to Plum, it gets kind of murky, because Plum, we lose the river right away. We're going on a private property. Land acquisition is much more difficult. So when we complete this project, we're going to the design and engineering in a couple of months. Some of it's going to be on road. It's going to have to be on road. And I think when you're building a trail like this and you're asking for money and you're going to council and you get the mayor's like, when's this going to be done? It's a good, and then it's like, oh, it's going to be 10 and 20 years. They don't want it done within every politician wants it done within their term, and it's just not going to happen. So you're trying to push these things forward. And I think that, like in Plum, each meeting has also been interesting in that in Plum, people worried about like eminent domain. They thought the trail was going to come through my property. So we're not planning on taking a house, but that's not our goal. And then in Verona, it's something it's again, it's this traffic light, and it's, the traffic light's coming anyway. But I think, we've been talking to different places where, another thing to bring to these meetings is it's like, I said it was in the paper, I'm like, don't bring pitchforks to the meeting. The fight's not right now. We're designing and we're working on it. We're being in these partnerships. We're getting people on board with the project, and the fight isn't today. It's so that traffic light, I'm in Verona going, it's coming. You're going to be at a traffic light in 10 years, maybe, So when that traffic light gets built in 5 years, we wanted to accommodate pedestrians and bicycles. We wanted to accommodate cyclists, walkers, so things like that. So I think it's like, those kind of concepts have been really helpful to move this forward.
And then we're kind of looking at this as phases too, like Chris said, because right away could take several years, right? The whole acquisition process, acquiring right away. So we have to have a short-term and a long-term plan. So to get this done short-term, maybe we have to go on the road, but we also have a long-term plan where on the side we're looking to acquire right away, permits. So we kind of have to have a plan for each. One, to get this trail built, but two, to ultimately get it to where it would be the safest.
Right. And then this week, Brian and his team have developed this matrix where, you'll see down at the bottom, $20 million. This is one little page. It goes on. As Brian said, we've got this broken down into 4 phases, basically the 4 communities, and probably like 30 segments, 25 segments. And one segment might be a mile and a half, something like that, if it's railroad right away and it's a asphalt path. Another segment might be just a bridge, but it's breaking them down into bite-sized pieces for grants, for design, for construction, things like that. So, and that's been extremely helpful.
Some of these, one of the segments could be a bridge. So if they get a grant for a couple $100,000, we can get the bridge built and then start build some momentum up by going each section at a time.
Right. And then we also, it's been helpful to do these kind of renderings, which are kind of crazy. Like, the road and then you see what it looks like when it's going to look like with the bus stop there, or expanding the sidewalk to, things like that. It's interesting to see those kind of drawings, like, a trail in a park that doesn't, I know you all see that stuff, but to me, it was really interesting to go, people actually come to our meeting and go, where is that? Or, oh, it's built already? No, it's coming, so that's pretty cool. And then, you know, as you go to the next slide, I think you come into maybe what here's these apartments. If you go back, here's this apartment. It's in the mobile home park. So you can see where, like, to get from Penrose Park to here on the trail is nothing. It's a mile. To go from here to the next park is 3/4 of a mile. So, you know, like I say, for these residents, you're connecting these residents not only recreation but to communities and other places. This is Milltown, and it's kind of funny when we started this project. I'm the planning director for Penn Hills a long time. So Jimmy Dowles, he owns an auto body shop, and I knew he had a piece of right of way. He owned this whole right of way. I forget how far it was, you know. I told him, I said, hey, Jimmy, you know, I'm building the bicycle trail. Would you be interested in selling me that property? Sell it. I'll give it to you. And so, I tell this trail like a couple of years ago. I thought, oh, these guys are like, feeling right? Giving us, like, he gave us the right of way. I said, dang, I don't have money to pay for like the you know, doing the drawings, even to buy it. No, I got. You know, so he gives you the land, pays 10 grand for the engineering, you know, unbelievable. So, and so far, no one else has stepped forward. But I'll say it at this point, like, and I don't know if this is the part of the trail where, this is where I'm saying, like, there's a little bridge right here. And I'm like, right, I need the drawings. I'm applying for grants. I want to get this rolling. And that's what I started to kind of realize I needed to slow down. We're asking for design drawings for a part that, like, I should be applying for maybe the grants in 26 or a little bit later, you know, that. But in the meantime, we did. We in the meantime, you know, I'm happy to say for DCNR, we applied to DCNR for the Milltown portion, and we received the grant. We only talked. And then we applied to the Regional Asset District for another $1 million. I'll round it up to $1 million. And so this part of the trail, this segment that you see on this map, is fully funded today. And so I'm hoping that we can just, like, keep the momentum, you know, we're going to keep coming back. But I think, you know, now it's going to take some time, you know, even in something like this, in a section where you were given the land, you got the money to build it, it's still going to take 3 or 4 years, right? So then when you have those, that's why I say for other people, don't fight today. Like, when there's that other part with the traffic light, or you need acquisition, you know, when I say that it's going to take 10, 15 years to build the trail, yeah, it takes 5 to, you know, when we got the feasibility study in 2020, you know, it might be 10 years before even the part that everyone's on board with gets built. But anyway, they'll need those DEP permits. So yeah, those always take a few years. So, you know, it's through a couple of days. Yeah, Eric. I might have jumped ahead. The other thing is, I think we called it the Lock Trail. That was sort of like something you know, it was a Roanoke, Penn Hills and Plum. And I realized we really forgot, like, one of the most important events, Allegheny County. Like, we could have added a B on the end. I don't know how that would have worked out. But it's a little long in here as we start rolling towards Boys Park. Boys Park now is putting in trails within their system. They are applying for grants, and so it's kind of nice. The letters of support. I requested the DCNR grant. I asked for letters of support, and I had 13 letters of support, you know, from everybody. So we're all this then Allegheny County. We're all like it's a huge, a big undertaking with a lot of interest, and I think it was. That's what we talked about this area.
Yeah, this is Allegheny River Boulevard. A lot of you are familiar with it. One of the challenges is this is a PennDOT road. It's a state-owned road. So we're in the middle of a lot of coordination with PennDOT. And really what this particular segment comes down to is a road diet. We're dropping a lane on the southern side here. So this will be a bike lane. And why did we go with the southern side? Basically, there are a couple reasons. One, you're coming up here through Verona, you have a nice, easy access. You have GetGo here. You have a potential connection to the Oakmont Business District via the Arboretum Trail. But probably the biggest reason we didn't go on the northern side, one is you eliminate some parking here. I think you have a lot of conflict points. Sullivan Avenue is a very wide intersection. Daly Way, there's a lot of heavy trucks that go in and out. So that's a pedestrian, bicycle, you know, heavy truck conflict. So we picked the southern side. Working with PennDOT, one of the first things we did was a traffic study to make sure by dropping a lane, we could still make sure we satisfy all the traffic requirements, which we did. So right now, we're still coordinating with PennDOT. One thing we will need to introduce here is a new traffic signal. The Edgewater development years ago did trigger a traffic signal. And then also under today's conditions, without even doing anything, that intersection does warrant a traffic signal. So right now we're doing the studies, we're coordinating with PennDOT and then Oakmont as well. A big part of us is to get Oakmont on board so they can bring up the traffic signal. And I think with that, one note is that in doing these, a big part is working with the municipality because they're going to own and maintain the bicycle facility. So a big part is working with that, with the supervisors and the board of directors, just to make sure we sell it to them and get their approval. Here's a rendering of Allegheny River Boulevard. Right now, we're showing some delineators. We're still coordinating with both Verona and Oakmont what those delineators will look like. But you can see how we drop the lane to make that an exclusive bike lane. And then here's our intersection at Center Avenue, where there is an existing signal. And we have to provide some access for get go. So we did a lot of coordination with them. And just real quick, Chris mentioned the percentage. We're about 75% complete. These are some of the tasks that we've completed and we're working on completing. Right now we're really focusing on our plans, profiles, and cross sections and what those will look like. We also did what was pretty interesting. That first term, small unmanned aircraft systems, we got our survey via drone. So we actually flew a drone over the 13, 14 miles. And that's how we did our survey and our topography. These are just some of the various bike lane typical sections. Again, somewhere like Allegheny River Boulevard, where we have, we try to get our 10-foot, that's our two-way separated bike lane. We also have, looking at some places where maybe we need that physical barrier based on the traffic. And then also based on what the municipality ultimately wants and what they can maintain. We also have, your bicycle way. And then as I mentioned, some of the short-term options would include the shared lane markings. And these are just some more renderings that we show through the various topography and terrain. Prasad, you want to hit on this? I'll just mention the permitting. We've done a lot of coordination with DEP, and permits do expire. Part of our submission is in these two final plan sets. With the permit, we're trying to do as much as we can without going through the whole permit process because a lot of these segments depend on grant funding. So if we move too soon for the permit, it's going to expire. It's going to need redone. So we're trying to get to a point where once you get a grant, then we just need to do some work to submit that permit, and then we're in the approval process. So, Chris, you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think on here it says trail walkthrough too. I want to say, in case I forget, but anybody in this room, anybody watching, like a day like today, walking this trail, unbelievable. I would be glad to take anybody on a walk. I've done that many times and really enjoy it. And then also, it makes me realize too, work for Penn Hills. It's a large municipality. And at first I didn't really realize what that means. Like we have money, we have capacity, we have staff. Like, so sometimes I go to these other communities, I'm like, come on, get your, and you realize as the planning director, I have daily, weekly tasks, monthly council meetings. I run the community development CDBG program, housing programs, all these different, I wrote the garbage contract, but I also have about 20% of my day can be what I want to work on, in my staff. So somebody might really wants to work on housing programs so I've been in recreation for most of my career, but I didn't until more recently, I was kind of naive to not realize that we have the luxury of, you get $1 million grant and then finance goes, just, spend the money and we put it, it's budgeted. I have $4 million, $6 million in my planning department budget right now. It's great. It's all, whether it's automatic red light, whether it's parks, so how did that money that Penn Hills can then run to then get reimbursed? I didn't,
it sounds kind of funny, but I didn't realize the luxury that that is, or the capacity that we have to, have staff to do that. So I've offered those kind of services to other community, to Verona, to other communities to kind of say, hey, if you need help with this, we can help you. And so I think it's really, I've been very, very fortunate to have a career in Penn Hills and have a municipality that has that kind of capacity to do those projects. And that's, I want to say, like, it's easy to go, I have a couple of points where I want to say, like, to everybody, like, to get a project done like this done, you need a champion. So that may be me, Allegheny County. This wouldn't happen without Allegheny County's input, And then if you need a champion, maybe like myself, but also a municipality that has that kind of capacity. And I actually didn't realize how fortunate I was to have that until recently. And trust the Romero Council to bring them a resolution for $2 million, and they approved it without question. So those kind of things are important, But I had a couple of points where you need a champion. I think if you plan on building a trail, look now. Like, I don't care if it's 25 years from now. Look now. These the right of way we need. It was abandoned quite some time ago. And Allegheny County in 1994, there's a map that shows a trail on this right of way, and those properties were sold like 20 years ago. It wasn't in the 50s or something. It was sold 20 years ago. And some of these communities, I'll say, didn't want a trail. They actually sold it because they didn't want it. They took out bridges because they didn't want it. Things have changed now, but that's our biggest challenge, is getting property acquisition and replacing bridges, millions of dollars in construction. Where if anybody here is thinking about building, even down the road, let's see who owns that right away now. So if we could have acquired that probably years ago, it'd be a totally different.
And that's one of the tasks that we started. We brought in a sub-consultant to evaluate some of the property that we're going to need. They took a look at the different values, similar values. And so we're in that process now of, where's the property we need? Let's start talking to the municipalities. So together we can start talking to those property owners and make them an offer. And that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. I would say for the most part, people are very interested, really excited about it. So it's good. And then, people, more trails, another trail. But I think, if you look at the scope of the state comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, trails is number one. People want trails. That's what they want. And it may have a lot to do with transportation, connectivity, economic development. But last slide there, this sounds public involvement. Yeah, we do involve the public in all these, and we've had 3 public meetings. We've had Penn Hills, Plum, Oakmont, and Verona will be in the spring. Really, at the Verona meeting, I think we're going to be, closing up the studies and really working on what the next steps as far as funding, like that. But at the public meetings, we've had we're very extremely well attended. That's why I say, for different projects we worked on, I'm sure you sometimes have meetings and nobody shows. We've had that, and with this, I think we've had just outstanding participation, public participation. Mostly positive, and those that aren't, that's okay. You need that too. Yeah, that's it. And this is how we can be reached. And like I said, I offer it to anybody. It's cold today, but it's perfect. Like, as the ground gets frozen, it's not muddy. All the knotweed is dead. Again, it actually is. It's that's all day walk too. Yeah, it's all day. Yeah. I can shorten it if you want, but it's all. Yeah. So you open up for questions? Yeah.
I have 2 questions. The first is about access points and regarding design and engineering. You mentioned like the mobile home park and businesses. In your design engineering, in addition to building the trail and bridges, do you also build the access points?
Yes. Yes. It passes through 9 parks. And each park will have, parking and trailheads.
So like the mobile home park or the Dollar General,
It actually passes right through the mobile home park. So they'll have access there. And like you said, you mentioned the Dollar General. That's determines the Mills portion.
Okay. I'm talking more like gates to.
no, just if I'm on the trail and I'd say, I'm going to go over there to that store, to that restaurant. Is there a way to get there?
Yeah, that's a really good point. It was brought up in the last public meeting too. Things like that, like having how to get on and off the access, and then also some wayfinding kind of things like that. But also access, like you're saying, actually you don't want to take somebody on a dangerous road to get to the trail, right? You know, those kind of improvements. And then also, it's really come to us also the history of the trail. And it's not on your question, but discovering more interpretive signage, maybe to show what the railroad, where the railroad was, what the uses were, things like that. And there'll be some safe crossings in particular areas that we want to try to keep them on that path so they don't.
Yeah. Second question, with you guys going to restaurants. First of all, you kept in shape by biking there, I assume. And did you?
No. It's a busy day. I know not to. I would talk. I always go. I know on a bicycle. Like Myers, I'm the champion. I'm trying to get the grants and stuff, but I do it.
But if I'm on the trail and I want to go to your restaurant, where am I going to park bike? Do your grants cover like bike racks? And are you working with businesses to make that possible?
Yeah, and in fact, also Scott Bodie, the manager of Oakmont, has actually put in place. He's taking parking spaces to put bike racks. So even if it's not part of the trail, the communities that the trail goes through are trying to resolve some of the questions.
So that's going to be a lot of coordination we're doing with Plum, Oakmont, Verona, Penn Hills, in strategic locations. So that's probably one of the later elements of design. But that's a great point.
What's interesting about Oakmont, the Arboretum Trail, is it's walking only. It's not a bicycle trail. So I keep talking about a huge bike rack at the end of it. And I suppose that at some point you're going to have the Vaught Trail, you're going to have the Three Rivers Terrace Trail, and a non-biking trail in between. I think public pressure will change that. I don't know who's on this meeting. So I think public pressure, but also sales that have, but they have some, they're working on actually the design of the bike rack now. It'll go into some of those parts.
Here to spring.
Hey, thank you.
First, thank you both for this. This is incredible. I grew up in Plum and my mother's in Penn Hill, so it's amazing to see this. I have technical questions. My big one, though, is about engagement after the project. Because a lot of the stuff in this world that we do, and you try to get it to how long it's going to take, like it's going, requires reminding the community of what they agreed to. So have you given any thought to what happens over the next few years or decade as you're trying to put this together and acquiring the land?
Yeah, I think last summer I had an intern, local government academy intern, because I started to realize we need to update our comprehensive park recreation open space plan for even maintenance and storage of this trail. You're putting in a trail and now you're asking your parks department, public works department to maintain it, things like that. But I think what's going to happen, I'm going to look to Courtney, was having partnerships, developing partnerships in the process that are going to, I was all worried about how we're going to maintain it. And then you start to realize, no, there's other organizations like Fine to get, they have volunteers or they have funding or they have expertise on how to maintain the trail. And I think you're right. When this trail is completed, I won't be working for that helps, So you're so how is that going to get pushed? How's it going to keep going? And so then you need really, I think, an organization. Each community is working on it. So you need an organization like Friends that has an overall umbrella that can kind of they can push it along. That can, I kind of joke about I'm going to be retired soon, and I kind of joke with people and I say I will not be at a council meeting. Yeah, we all know the people you're at the person who left is coming back on. And it's I said to me to the council, I'm not going to be in heck by. I brought up and how much everybody. I will not be there. But I'll have somebody else do it.
Speaking of council meetings, that is a way too to make sure, maybe not every council meeting, but maybe we try to attend one a quarter to update, whether it's Penn Hill, Plum, Oakmont, Verona. They could bring in the public and we could do an update that way after public meetings.
It's a good point though, we've had such momentum and how do you keep it going, But how do you keep the funding? How do you keep it? But I think the county's been really instrumental and Friends have been really, look like the funding that the county has put out for the studies that we've had so far, things like that. I don't suspect that they're, going to spend all that kind of funding and gain that kind of energy and then drop the ball. And then they go.
Yeah, and we already kind of have a relationship in place with all four municipalities to do a similar thing that we're doing with the north side of the Allegheny, because that's been a ongoing project for the past 20 years. So we're going to I hate to say when he retires, it's already upsetting me, but when we're already preparing to transition into that.
So see y'all later.
Chris, I have a question about property acquisition. I mean, you didn't really touch on that at all. Are you expecting to have to do some property acquisition, and what, and about how many properties are you talking about?
I was gonna say hundreds of them. So use a dozen properties. My thing again was, say you have a property owner that I think the hard part is gonna be somebody bought a piece of property. And if you own a 66-foot wide, mile long piece of property, what's it worth? Not a lot. So I think people think they're sitting on something that is worth a lot of money. And so my first impression was, yeah, but if it's going to close the deal, it's worth $1 million. It's worth hundreds of $1,000. And the writer, Mike, our writer, goes, don't say that. I say it in a public meeting, people are like, don't say it. So, but they have somebody doing appraisals and what it's worth, and then
We're looking at trail easements as opposed to actually acquiring the property, right, is to have that trail easement. Now we still pay the property in the
I mean, we just completed a master plan for Sawmill Run, and Nancy was part of that. And so and I'm sure that everyone here in this room is familiar with Sawmill Run and how awful it is. And we have exactly what you're talking about. We have people who are holding on to pieces of property that are, they're in the floodplain. They continue to get flooded out every year, and they continue to think that it's worth $800,000, and they won't sell. So it's I'd like to know if you have a trick to that.
I think time. I don't know if that means, but it's time. It's like people want the trail, and then they think it's worth a lot, and they realize it isn't. But I feel like a lot of these areas, development has passed them by. Like people had property, they think it's worth a lot, and developments like Penn Hills isn't booming housing or something. So this is kind of their opportunity. Like get on board, or
you're not gonna get any.
Yeah, you're not gonna get anything. But I think maybe things even need to change. Like we were talking about the sidewalks in the last presentation. Like Penn Hills has extremely narrow right of way for roads and things like that. I mean, a lot of people want sidewalks, but it requires private property. So then the private property owner says, "Well, who's going to be liable for that sidewalk?" Oh, you are. Well, they don't want it. So as much as I try to build sidewalks, it's like when they realize. So that's a big part of it too. I think it's like they're willing to sell it. They're willing to give an easement, whatever. They just don't want to have any responsibility or part of it. So I think that's a huge. That's a big thing to try to sell. Is just that. How is it going to affect me personally? But it's very interesting. I've had a lot of discussions with people too that you have like residents that are for it, residents that aren't for it, and then residents who go, "I'm for it," but don't tell my neighbor. It's kind of funny, like, and that's actually happened. So it's kind of cool how like you're like. So then they go, "Well, that's going to be a tough," and we go, "It'll be okay,"
But time is sometimes your friend.
Yes.
The Gap Trail had a section of property that they had to go around. It went out the road. And eventually the guy died. And his kid said, "What are we arguing about? You got it."
Yeah. It's like it is.
So time sometimes helps.
I remember that section on the Gap Trail.
Yeah. Well, they might think too that it's not going to happen. They might think, "Oh, if I just hold out, this is not going to." But then when they're leaving their yard or their driveway and they see bicycles on the street, that is crazy. If I had let them have that right, like I think it's the time, it's seeing what the effects are, how much people enjoy it, things like that. I think will really help.
Another issue is around is the Montour Trail. There was a township that said, "We're not going to do the trail." Montour said, "Fine, we'll build the trail to here. We'll build the trail to here." And all the residents says, "Where's our trail?"
I've had that already. I've had people say in Verona, they say, "Well, you build this part and build this part, but not do the light, and it's kind of, I go, "No, you're going to that's the other thing is they think the bot committee's like, we're going to build the thing. And so there are going to be those segments that, yeah, we'll build those pieces, and eventually public pressure, time, it'll happen.
And that's a great point because with our segment matrix, that's kind of a strategy too. You get funding for this piece, and then it builds momentum. And those missing links, they're eventually going to fall too. So that's part of the strategy by putting so many different segments together, and it's a really constructible, buildable pieces.
The squish
method.
squish method.
Yes, I've got a lot of terms like squish method. Was it snarly? It was Cynthia Don snarly. Different. You get these. The script. We have a lot of snarly, but it's kind. And I just think since the last time we were here, it's like 2 years. Now we're all. And actually, there is a part. Oakmont already has a part that's constructed, so you could park and go on a trail. Yeah, it's like a quarter mile, something like that. Beautiful gravel trail, and along the river, so you can actually go. And I'll be guide, like I said, I've got it. That's all I got. Thanks for having us back.
You're welcome. Thanks, Matt. Excellent. It's great to hear progress, and it's great to hear your enthusiasm, which is contagious. I think good. That's why we do what we do, right? All right. So moving on, the next thing we'll be hearing from Andy Davis from Indiana County, who recently did a European bike tour. And when you're ready, Andy, you can begin. Thanks.
Hi, Leanne. Thanks. I work with our local bike and pedestrian committee, and at one meeting after I returned from Europe, one of my colleagues suggested I present my trip to this meeting. So that's why I'm here. Can everyone hear me okay? I see a few heads. Yep, there, thumbs up. So what I'd like to do is just share with you what I experienced on the Eurovelo trail system, which is an absolutely amazing trail system through Europe. Many of you folks that work with trails are probably familiar with this trail system, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my personal experience. Let me see if I can figure out how to share this. Let's see here. I'm used to using Zoom and sharing. Maybe somebody can help me with this. Share. There we go. The window. Okay. Sharing. Sorry about this. So I need to, it says I have to do the same thing that Anna did, quit and reopen. So if you can give me just a second, I'll come back and start my presentation. 1 second.
That'll be fine. 40 years getting.
Let's try the share again. Okay, there we go. Let's see. Okay, can everyone see this image? This slide or this PowerPoint window?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, so let me put it in presentation mode and get started. So this is actually a photograph of my wife and I after we finished riding through our first country. This is the border crossing between Denmark and Germany. It's there's not much to it. There's definitely no border guards or anything like that. You might even miss it if you're not paying attention. I want to tell you a little bit about how I got how I ended up thinking that the Eurovelo trail system is the way to go. So after a ride on one of my local trails called the Ghost Town Trail, which I'm pretty sure Leanne had a hand in making, my wife and I decided that we would celebrate raising 3 kids, and we would ride our bicycles across the country, and we would try to use as much of the Great American Rail Trail as possible. So I spent months trying to connect the sections of the Great American Rail Trail using a program called Ride with GPS. I tried to find roads that would be relatively safe, that would allow me to get from one completed trail section to another. For example, up in Idaho, there's a trail system that goes all the way through the panhandle of Idaho, but then there's a heck of a lot of space in Montana and Wyoming. Well, Wyoming has virtually no sections completed. So I had to work out how I was going to do that. And I spent months mapping that out and figuring out how I would do it. And then in February of 2021, which was 3 months before leaving for Washington, and well, when I say Washington, I actually was probably pretty close to where Anna lives. I was going to start on the Olympic Discovery Trail out in La Push, Washington. But just a couple months before leaving for Washington, and a week after receiving our new touring bikes to do this trip, a virus attacked my heart. And on December 12th of 2021, I received a new heart, and that kind of changed our plans a bit. So the Eurovelo trail system came into my mind because I knew that there were parts of the trail that I could ride given my new heart situation. My heart works fine. My new heart, my woman's heart, works just fine. But my problem is I can climb, but my heart takes a long time to ramp up in order to do climbs. So if it's a shallow grade, I can climb just fine. But if they're short, punchy climbs, I have trouble with that. So that's why one of the reasons I started looking at the Eurovelo cycle route as opposed to using the Great American cycle path. And so 6 months after my surgery, I started riding my bike outside again. And I will say, and I want everybody to know that's involved with building trails, that I always told myself that trails are great, but they're great for times when you have kids and you're pulling your kids in a burly or pulling a trailer bike, or when you're older. And I thought, I'm sure I'll use those trail systems again when I'm older. But right now, I enjoy mountain biking and I love to be a road rider. I like being out on the rural roads of Indiana County. Well, once my heart was impacted, I needed those trails. And I think all of you folks that are making trails need to understand that that those trails help people rehabilitate. And without the trails, I would not have been able to start riding. So thanks to all of you that do the good work of making trails. So about a year after the surgery, my wife and I started dreaming of riding across the US again. But when I started doing all the mapping, or when I remembered all the mapping that I had done, I just knew that there were climbs that I just wasn't ready to take on yet. So I started looking at the Eurovelo trail system, and a friend of mine has ridden a number of these trails, and he suggested that that might be a good way to go. And that's why I kind of shifted gears, excuse the pun, and moved to Europe for this big bicycle tour. And I just want to point out this is the overall trail system that you're looking at on this map of Europe. It is incredibly extensive. You can take a trail all the way from near Amsterdam all the way to Moscow, for example. You could take a trail from Estonia all the way down to Greece. One trail connects all those countries. You can take a trail from northern Scotland all the way through to Norway. One trail connects all that. And we chose a group of trails that would allow us to do the kind of touring that we wanted to do, which was relatively flat touring for a couple old farts. And so we chose the following routes. So, a little bit about the Eurovelo cycle network. There's over 92,000 kilometers in this network. It's absolutely gigantic. Not all of it is off-road, separated from traffic, but there's just a huge system in Europe connecting all these countries. There's 17 Eurovelo routes, and you saw those routes on the previous map. Those routes cross all of Western Europe into the Iberian Peninsula, all through Portugal, Spain, all the way through Italy, into, also down through, say, Serbia and into Greece and out to the Black Sea. It's just incredible. The routes cross 38 countries all across Europe. The network is still a work in progress, as some of the trails that we heard about today are still a work in progress. But many of the trails, even though they're a work in progress, they might not be completely like certified, but the trails are there. In other words, you might have to ride a few miles of road, but then you're back on separated trail systems. So a lot of those trails that you saw on the map do exist. This is actually not correct. The Rhine cycle route, which we used, has been certified to meet the quality requirements of the Eurovelo organization. But there is another route that recently has been certified, and that's the route that runs along the west coast of France and all the way down into southern Spain, and that has also been certified. So the Rhine has been certified, and but it just doesn't matter. All the routes that you want to ride are rideable, from what I understand. So there is usage data out there, the impact in terms of economics and the number of users and that kind of stuff. If you go to eurovelo.com, you can find information about that. It's really quite incredible how not just communities have worked together, but countries have worked together in order to make this network. It's absolutely phenomenal. So the Eurovelo routes that we chose and why. So I wanted to ride relatively flat areas because because of my heart. I'm strong, I'm capable. We did do a lot of climbing, but generally our plan was to ride along rivers and in flat areas. And these Eurovelo routes allowed me to do that, or allowed us to do that. You'll see the top arrow there, that's Oslo, Norway. And the bottom arrow represents Frederikshavn, Denmark. That's the ferry that we took. We took a ferry from Oslo to Frederikshavn. We had spent some time in Norway, and then we got on our bikes and rode to Frederikshavn in Denmark. And then we followed that green trail all the way down to Germany and Hamburg. And then the next trail we followed, starting over here near Dusseldorf in Germany, we followed the Rhine Trail, Eurovelo 15, all the way down to Basel, Switzerland. So through Germany, through the Alsace region of France, and into Switzerland. And part of the reason we followed this route was we actually have friends in Switzerland and were able to visit them. We put our bikes in storage and visited them for a while. But after we visited them, we got on the Eurovelo 6 route, which takes you from Basel, basically, all the way to, we finished in Budapest, Hungary, which is just about here where this arrow ends in Hungary. We chose those routes because Denmark's flat. The Rhine is obviously a river, and we were able to ride on a fairly flat area. And then, of course, this red line represents the Donau, or the Danube River. And so we followed that from a town called Donaueschingen, which is the headwaters of the Danube. And we followed that all the way to Hungary, except for a tiny place in Austria that we had to miss because of the flooding that took place this summer in that section of Europe. So that's why we chose the routes we did. And I wanted to talk to you guys that make trails about what the Eurovelo network is so cool, what makes it so special. And there's a few things. Obviously, the changes in culture and language are something that you're just not going to get in the United States. If we had ridden across the U.S., we're going to speak English all the way across, which is great, but it's also nice to mix it up a bit. Not that I speak Slovakian, but it was cool to be exposed to these different languages. Changes in scenery and landscapes. We saw all kinds of landscapes. Obviously, we steered clear of the Alps because I didn't want to ride over them. But we did see, the flatlands, the sand and the beaches of Denmark, to the cityscapes of Budapest and Bratislava, and all the cities down the Rhine like Cologne and all the Strasbourg in France. So changes in scenery and landscapes was a big part of it, and one of the things that makes it so cool. Another thing that makes the Eurovelo network so special is the organization, the maps, and the signage. So in the photograph to the right, you see a signpost, and at the very top, you'll see a blue symbol, and that's the Eurovelo 6 sign. And basically, if you can see the sign, you're not going to get lost. These signs are everywhere. The signage is fantastic. It's really hard to get lost. Plus, there's maps that Eurovelo makes that help you plan and decide where you want to go, what you want to see along the way. The whole system is just so well done. Additionally, the cycling infrastructure is amazing. somebody in the last presentation mentioned bike racks. You know, those kinds of things are a necessity when you're carrying everything that you own for 2.5 months on a bike. You have to be able to lock your bike, because if your bike is stolen, that's your home, your car, it's everything. So all the way along, the infrastructure is there to allow bicycle touring to take place. And our places like the Gap Trail, for example, offers some of that infrastructure, and that's really important as we found as we traveled through Europe. Another thing that's just amazing about the Eurovelo route is all these trails are interconnected. So if we had wanted to go from, let's say, Basel to Moscow, we could have done that using the Eurovelo trail system. It's just amazing that all these things interconnect. And what makes all this possible, of course, is geography. And the previous presentation talked all about geography, right? I mean, the trails are possible because the railroads were first built, and then when those were abandoned, those areas that were flat, and they made for ideal trails. And so Europe is crisscrossed with major rivers like the Rhine, the Danube, the Seine. You know, all these rivers provide excellent opportunities for a trail network. And of course, that's where the trails have been built. So at this point, I want to just try to highlight some of the things I just talked about: the interconnectedness, the cycling infrastructure that was available that allowed us to live for 2.5 months traveling through Europe incredibly comfortably. And this photograph is actually taken in someone's backyard. And we used an organization as we traveled called Warm Showers. And it's an organization that's designed to allow cyclists to have a place to stay, either in a home or on a lawn like this. And so people open their homes for bicycle tourists. And this was it's actually a German family who lives in Denmark that allowed us to stay on their land. And those kinds of experiences, when you get to talk to the families and talk to the kids of the families, it's just an amazing part of the journey. And we tried to use Warm Showers as much as we could as we traveled through Europe. One of the amazing things about Denmark was that the Eurovelo trail through Denmark that we followed, they didn't care what kind of terrain it was. If they wanted the trail to go there, they made it go there. And people are so into cycling in Denmark that people wouldn't even think twice about riding on some of these trails. Some of these trails were single track, super rocky. This is double track through the woods. We rode a lot of that. We were expecting it, but in America, that kind of trail just, that wouldn't fly for a national trail. You'd need a trail that it might be crushed limestone or something a little less robust, let's say. But it was the diversity of Denmark that we absolutely loved. But if you want to ride on a trail in Denmark, there's a trail for bikes next to virtually every road. No one needs a car. You just don't need a car. Denmark is incredibly flat. The trail system is amazing. And if you want to ride on paved trails between towns, they're there. Another thing that makes Denmark incredibly special is the shelter system. The shelter system is a bunch of shelters we might call them Adirondack shelters, but shelters that are built all over the country. Thousands of shelters that small communities build that anyone can go to at any time. You can ride up to these shelters, and as you can see there, our bikes are parked in front of this shelter. It's a 3-sided shelter. My wife's bike is on the right. My bike is on the left. All of my wife's panniers are on a little bench in front of the shelter there. And so we took advantage of these all the time. We didn't have to pay for these. They were free. One of the amazing things about this journey was that that we never had to worry about animals eating our food. We could leave our food out, we couldn't believe it. We could leave our food out in our panniers or on a table, and nothing would bother our food, like would not happen here. So we could go into these shelters. We could even eat in the shelters. I'm used to not eating in my tent here in the United States, but it is possible. If we wanted, we could actually eat in the shelters and not attract animals, which it just blew me away. But anyway, the Danish the shelter system is incredible. This map on the left shows just a fraction of the shelters that are available throughout Denmark. What we would do is we would follow the trail, and then we might have to ride 2 or 3 miles off the trail to find a shelter, which was free lodging, and it was just amazing. Many of the shelters had such a variety. Some of them had earthen roofs, like this one. Others were just incredible structures made out of wood. Really neat. This is another warm showers host that let us stay in their hay bale house, which was really neat. Another earthen roof. This whole house was made out of hay bales and then coated in clay. I'd love to show you more pictures of the inside of this. The man that let us stay there, he was a mechanical engineer, and it was always his dream to make this a house like this. And he let us have the whole place to ourselves, which was just incredible. As I said, the Danish trails, they would take you across all kinds of stuff, including sand dunes with loose sand that you'd have to push your 65 or 80-pound bike up these things. They would have you riding across packed sand on the beaches. That extra person is my sister. My sister rode a few. She rode through Denmark with us and then peeled off to the Netherlands to see friends. But they'll have you go anywhere that a bike can go, and we loved every single minute of that. Once we left Denmark, I consider the next section of our trail the Rhine, where we rode through Germany, France, and into Switzerland. And the photograph on the right is me and a gondola in Koblenz. And the bicycle infrastructure is so good that if you want to take your bike on the gondola to the top of the mountain above the city of Koblenz, no problem. You just take that thing right on, and there's places for it to sit while you comfortably sit in a chair while the gondola takes you to the top of the mountain. It's really impressive. A few things about the Rhine section. No matter what, even if there was construction, they made sure that there was a safe bike lane for you as you traveled. And of course, in Europe, bikes are seen not just as recreational tools, but a way to get around. And so this is very important for people to use as transport. Sometimes we'd have to travel through big cities, again, like Dusseldorf or Cologne. And sometimes we would have to ride in a separated trail. But what I liked about those separated trails was there was always a distinct type of material that was different than the asphalt. So usually it was brick or some kind of stone that you would ride on, and it would be separated by something that would have kind of rumble strips on it, so that if the car hit those rumble strips, they would know that they're going to get into that bike lane. So very well done, even in places that were very urban. And then, of course, once you got out into the countryside, the trail could just be crushed gravel, but separated from traffic almost always, which was just fantastic. This is another example of a trail heading into a city, separated from traffic. Just a wonderful place to ride. And when we were traveling along the Rhine, of course, the Rhine, and there's a canal system next to the Rhine. They have to have locks in order to get the boats through. They need to regulate the water level to make sure that the boat traffic can pass through. So even on locks, there was bicycle infrastructure, paths just for bikes to get across these locks, which was super cool. And then here's some more of the signage. And sometimes when you are in rural areas, so first of all, if you look at the sign, there's a Eurovelo 15. Let's see, can I draw on this? Let's see. Yeah, right here, there's a Eurovelo 15 sign. And then up here, this is telling you that the trail system is actually shared by tractors and bicycles. And we actually saw a lot of that. We saw a lot of shared use with kind of agricultural stuff as we passed through rural Germany and France. So pretty cool. Another thing that we found as we traveled through Europe and down the Rhine and along the Danube was that there are campgrounds along the way, which is fantastic. And there's actually special accommodations just for cyclists. For example, places for cyclists to cook or get out of the rain if you're sleeping in a tent, like we did most of the time. So these special accommodations at places like campgrounds made it especially nice as a bicycle tourist. And these are things that I think American campgrounds could do a better job with, as I've seen them on trails in America compared to what I've seen in America. This is just an example of traveling through your rural, either Germany or France, I'm not sure. And sometimes we would be sprayed by the irrigation systems as we traveled through cornfields or whatever we were riding through. But always safe places to ride. This is, sorry for that goofy shot of the presenter, but I'm actually sitting right next to a canal. And this is another example of where geography kind of dictates the modes of transportation that are found in an area. This is a canal in the Alsace region of France that goes all the way to Basel, Switzerland. And we followed this canal for maybe hundreds of miles. And the canal was actually still active. Many parts were still active. And so we got to see things like canal or boats on the canal as we rode along it. And it just makes for a perfect place to ride. It's super scenic, super safe, and just beautiful. Notice we have the baguettes for our lunch. So we must be in France there. this is one of my favorite videos. When we left the city of Strasbourg, we were following that canal, and this day was absolutely stunning. And I'll see if I can play this video. But this is my wife, and it was actually like we were riding in a dream. I mean, it was so beautiful. The sun was hitting the water and reflecting on this giant row of sycamore. Just an incredible memory and an incredible bit of infrastructure for riding your bike. Moving on to the next part of our trip, I mentioned we saw friends in Switzerland. Then we rode from Donaueschingen, which is the start of the Danube, and here we are. This is a map. There's a map behind us that represents the Danube. So the very beginning, I'll show you a picture of that, or I'll draw. Oops, sorry. You go back. Yeah, there we go. So this is the start of the Danube. This is where we were, and then all the way over here, this is in Bulgaria, and this is actually the Black Sea. So if you want, you can ride all that trail all the way to the Black Sea. And honestly, I wish we had time. We would have done it. It was just so cool. Let me see here. More infrastructure. I was always promoting Donate Life as we rode, because obviously I'm a big advocate for people being organ donors. If you haven't thought about it, I highly encourage it. I never thought, even though I was an organ donor, I never thought I would be a recipient, and here I am. A recipient. It's just amazing that I'm able to do the things I am. Anyway, another cool bit of infrastructure. I don't know what bridges cost. I don't build trails like you folks do, but here we are riding through rural Germany, and they just put in a bridge across the Danube. I don't know, $500,000, $1 million to cross the river right there, just for bikes and pedestrians in the middle of nowhere. Absolutely amazing. Really cool infrastructure. I did want to point out some of the cool or not so cool places that we slept, because when you're touring, and if you guys are building long trails, one of the things that I would like to see in America is more places to sleep as you ride. For example, the Red Bank Trail actually has a little shelter where you can sleep. I think that's amazing. Of course, along the Gap Trail, there's places where you can sleep. Along the Pine Creek Trail in Central PA, there's places you can sleep. And then near the Danube, there's places you can sleep. And I'd never slept in a giant barrel, so we decided to do that. We also had never slept in a barn, so we decided to sleep in a barn. And that was one of the worst decisions of my entire life. It seemed cool. It looks very nice. There's a little curtain here that they built inside this barn and 2 nice mattresses. I woke up with so many flea bites. Flea bites covered every inch of my body. It was horrible. For days after that, I regretted the fact that I spent a night in a barn. So if you're ever thinking about a night in a barn on a mattress, don't do it. That's my recommendation. Here's another example of some cycling infrastructure. I'm not sure exactly where we were.
Excuse me, Andy, if I could just interrupt for one moment. I'm not sure if you have left in your presentation time-wise. We are down to about 3 minutes remaining. So.
Okay. Yeah, I should almost be done. I'm almost done. I'll just click through these final photos here.
That's good. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. another example of a bridge for pedestrians that I can't even imagine how much it cost, but was built. Sometimes we had to push. I did want to mention this idea. This is in Europe. Or in Germany, there's a certification called Bet and Bike, and it's hotels that are designed just for bicycle tourists. And this is an example of the storage at one of those hotels. More bicycle infrastructure near the Danube. This is bicycle storage at a hostel, which is amazing. You can store your bikes and then go see the city you might be in. We did have to ride through mud after the floods, something that you just have to deal with. This is an example of, there is a trail there, but we couldn't see it. That was an interesting part of the trip. And then we did make it to Budapest. And I just want to say that without all that amazing signage and all those amazing trails, it just wouldn't have been possible for us to do it. So the work that you guys do is just so important. And my hope is that you guys will keep connecting these trails and making more places to stay along those trails. So thanks a lot. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, we'll open up for questions. Now it's a great presentation. It's gives us a lot to strive for, right?
Part of your experience was cycling in cities on the trails shared with motorized vehicles. Could you talk about the speed limits of motorized vehicles in those cities that were shared with the fellow group?
Sure. I would say that in many locations, the speeds would be similar to speeds you'd expect to find in American cities. What I would say, though, is that even though the speeds might be the same, because much of the trail was very well separated, and I didn't show pictures of this, there's actually bicycle traffic lights. So bikes can actually leave before cars to make it safer for them to cross intersections. And so even though the speed might be the same, I felt much safer most of the time in Europe, if that answers your question.
Thank you. The other thing in Europe, it's everybody respects the bicyclists for this time. It's an accent between a bicyclist and a car. The car is at fault. His insurance pays. And as a result, everybody bicycles. So if you take off a bicyclist, your grandmother is probably the person just behind him and will holler at you.
Yes, it's true. In fact, we came to the conclusion that cyclists almost have precedence over pedestrians in Europe. I mean, they're almost seen as having more rights, I felt, than pedestrians in many cases. So I would agree with that. I will say that probably the most dangerous part of riding in Western Europe, before we got to places like Slovakia and Hungary, where there weren't as many e-bikes, but the most dangerous aspect of riding was e-bikes and people riding at twice the speed that we were on our regular pedal power bicycles. I know that's a whole can of worms that you guys have probably had to tackle, but that was probably the most dangerous aspect of our trip.
One of the dangers of my trip was coming back from Europe, and I was cycling the roads here. I realized about it was only over there. And that was very dangerous.
Yeah. It's eye-opening when you come back here. There's no doubt. Absolutely. Arts.
Andy, great presentation. Really interesting. I have a question for I have a couple. Did you bring your own gear? Like, is that all your own gear? And is there any kind of like GPS? So but those are my real questions.
Yeah, so those are great questions. Yes, we brought our own bikes because those are the bikes that we purchased to ride across the United States. I had sold my last touring bike many years ago, and so we both needed touring bikes. So we did bring everything. Those are our panniers, our racks, and our bicycles. And the question about the GPS route is absolutely every single one of these Eurovelo routes has a complete GPX track that's available for free to download. I use those extensively to map things before we left. So it's just, yeah, they've thought of pretty much everything. You still have to pedal, but everything else is kind of well planned. So yeah.
The siding is impressive. We took you have 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we had GPSs, and the signage was impressive. You come to an intersection, 3 trails head different ways, and their signage telling you which way to go. You don't need the GPS because the signage.
Yeah, right. That's actually something that we found almost immediately. I mean, we started riding in Denmark, and I'm looking down at the phone or the GPS, and I'm, I don't want to be doing that. I want to look up, and very shortly after that, I realized just ride, and there'll be a sign, and that's what we did the rest of the trip. So yeah, occasionally we need the GPS to get out of the city. So yeah.
All right, we have time for one more question, and then we'll move on to our final presentation. All right, now hearing one last question. Thanks again, Angie. That was very great presentation. Appreciate you taking the time to share with us. Next up, sure.
Thank
you. We'll hear from Kristen Saunders. I just called you Kristen Toll. Kristen Saunders. It's some designer.
It's over. Demo class. We're doing sites?
Yeah. Okay. I know we're over time. So I will make this short. I will quicken it up. This is sort of a snapshot of where our analysis is. So it's already a snapshot time. So just make a smaller snapshot. So this is it was okay. Great, perfect spot. So we're nothing analysis. Just that this is an active transportation plan update. So we're working with all SBC data. We're not collecting new data. So we've sort of collected and cleaned some of that data. We've been working on the multimodal analysis, and we've been doing stakeholder engagement, coming to a lot of these meetings, and we also have some listening sessions. So we're right kind of on plan that says draft finalized plan in the blue. We're starting that this month. There we go. Okay. So there are 3 listening sessions. They're doing listening session starting tomorrow, right? Wednesday. And 2 next week. So if you are in one of these vicinities, please come. We're also scheduling one for January for Allegheny County that will be in this building. So if you'd rather wait for that one, that's great too. And if you're on the steering committee, we're going to do a very similar exercise, more information at that committee meeting, which is next week. So you won't miss anything there. There is a survey that is live now. So I'm sure Leanne has sent this out to this meeting. You're welcome to take a little screenshot of the QR code. We can send it out right now. Going fast. So the multimodal analysis, the sort of 4 questions that we've been working with that we established with SBC at the beginning of this project. You can see them here. I'm going to walk through them a little bit. We've been working on trying to answer these questions. So we've been doing, which areas have low stress access to jobs, businesses, schools? Where can people access the trail network without an automobile? We're working on identifying critical gaps and where can people access public transportation safely and comfortably. So we've been doing a bicycle level of stress analysis, which all of this is trying to kind of humanize how it feels to actually be walking or biking in certain spaces. So you might be familiar with this. It has to do with travel, the number of travel lanes, the speed, the amount of traffic, and whether there's a bicycle facility present and the type of bicycle facility. We've also been doing a pedestrian level of crossing stress. So kind of the same thing, trying to measure how it actually feels across that street as a pedestrian. So this has to do with, is there some sort of stop control? And if not, it has to do with prevailing speed, traffic values, number of lanes, and if there's a median. So if you can cross one direction at a time, which reduces stress. So we're getting into the map. So this is a really, really large area. Like I said, we are kind of rapidly doing this analysis. It's a pretty fast project. So we're rapidly doing this analysis. We're reviewing it yesterday with our team, but it's a really large area. And what that says at the top is just that the largest jurisdictions in each county have the lowest stress levels to access jobs, transit, businesses, and schools. So it's actually using those jobs, transit, businesses, and school locations. This is showing the walk shed. We did something we need to talk about. We did pick a 5-mile bike shed, which is kind of means the whole area is kind of showing up. So we might want to revisit our thresholds. But so this is showing the walk shed right now. Obviously, there's so many places we could zoom in. And I did want to mention the final plan. We're doing a story map. So because it's such a large area, so people would be able to kind of zoom in, turn on and off some of these layers. So it's hard to present any of these in a static map. So, just zooming into what it would mean for, say, Emmitsburg. So this is showing, where can people access jobs in using a low stress walking network. So this kind of shows you the streets that are low stress today. This also kind of shows you if you were able to build sidewalks or make some crossings less stressful, that would expand that network. And that would be the goal. So one thing we could measure is, the percentage of streets that are low stress or the sort of, square mileage of area that is accessible, or the percentage of jobs. There are many ways to kind of measure this. But how many people can access the trail network without an automobile? So we did the walk shed and bike shed analysis. This is the high level map. So there are many areas that allow people to walk through a trail that safely, according to on a low stress network, which might make sense to you all. This next image I'm about to show is a little bit funny. I mentioned we are kind of doing this analysis right now. Water trails are currently showing up as trails. So this little bonus analysis. So I was like, the Butler Freeport Trail goes into Butler. It does not. So this is showing access to the creek, to the water trail, and we're still working on some of that analysis. But this is the type of maps that we're working on. And as you can see from this map already, the Butler Freeport Trail, I believe, starts right where that little blue line is on the right, kind of just outside of Butler. So it does not have a lot of low stress walking access. But if it would be brought into town, it would have all of this low stress walking access. So next, this one I think is really interesting, looking for critical gaps. So looking at places where there is a gap in the bicycle and pedestrian network. So again, we're just looking at pedestrians today, but looking at where there is a gap and where we see a lot of transportation trips that are short. So like places where people are going 1 mile or 2 miles, where it could be replaced by a walking or biking trip. So you can see this map here. And I think this is interesting because it's really getting into like projects, and we talked about the expense of sidewalks, but how do we really prioritize some of those sidewalks lengths? So zooming into, let me make sure I got everything I wanted to say here, but as those gaps are filled in, you should see a mode shift. So looking at Latrobe, and like I mentioned, we are still QCing this and running it by all of our partners. It's a large area, so we can't get everything right the first time. But looking at Latrobe, these are very specific kind of gaps in the network that, if improved, there are a lot of short trips and could result in more walking and biking. So
Yeah, so a lot of this is providing tools for communities. Not all of these gaps might be the right answer based on kind of land uses, things like that. But it's kind of providing a tool for communities to think about some of their, bicycle pedestrian projects. So where is it safe and comfortable to walk, bike, and access public transportation? So similar to some of the other analyses, the largest jurisdictions have the lowest stress levels to access public transportation. Zooming into Westmoreland, so you can see, zooming into Westmoreland County, but Irwin, you can see that there are a large part of the kind of downtown area or has sort of a low stress access to transit. But you can also see where if you improve some of those linkages, you could expand that stress number. I went fast. How was that? Any questions? Like I said, this is a sort of snapshot time of how we're thinking about it. Sorry I went so fast, but I know it's.
I was just curious, how were you measuring the level of traffic stress? Like, what indicators were you using for that?
Back to that slide because it helps me. So for bicycle level of traffic stress, it's the second bullet here. So travel, it's actually like a pretty, it's a very specific process. So it's travel lanes, traffic volume, speed, presence of a bike facility, and width. I think it takes into account too whether there. That's the last one. And whether there's parking. So if it's a kind of narrow bike lane next to parking, that would be considered a higher stress facility.
And is that just like static sensor? Like, how are you measuring that?
From SP, so this is relying on SPC data, which is really great data set. So it is really detailed. So this is based on the quality of data that you have. But it does sort of also identify those roads that maybe are have really low traffic volumes and low speeds that might be low stress today. So it's not just dependent on that bike network.
Is it possible to factor in like EDA, seniors, children in this? Not just strictly bike and ped, but for really vulnerable road users.
Yeah. Yes, I'm curious what you think or how you
Meaning like the length of time when you're looking at walk sheds on getting to basic resources, how much more of a challenge that might be.
Yeah. Well, this does take into account, I know we had some, I don't think we have quite enough data to think about like curb ramps and that sort of level of accessibility at this scale. I think definitely be something cool to look at a or neighborhood scale and things like that. But we could definitely look at different walk shed distances. I think would be a way to look at that kind of access. And then of course, access to schools and places where you expect it to go, kind of like changing the destinations a little bit for each of those. That's not part of our project currently, but yeah, I think that would be a way to look at it, would be to look at like, you would maybe change the destinations that you're looking at. So if you're looking at access for young children, maybe it's more like schools and I don't know where do kids go. Grocery stores, small farms, so it's like candy.
Center, right?
Stores. Yeah, we just want to spend our money on bad. Okay. Parks. Sorry, I grew up in Missouri. Yeah, and then seniors might focus on the same things like, around doctor's offices and senior centers, things like that.
Bars.
Grocery stores, bars. So,
Alexandria.
Parks. Parks. It's the same parks.
This got me wondering about grade of roadways, and is that a factor in how difficult it is? And then also that then made me think of like the steps in the city.
Yeah.
Is it just
what's adjacent to a roadway, or does this also include city steps that are not adjacent to a roadway?
It should include the steps. I'll verify that. It should include the steps because there are paths on here. And the steps are streets right away. So it should include the steps, but I can confirm that. In terms of, we talked about how to think about grade, because it is kind of like low stress in one direction and high stress in another, maybe. But I think we came to the conclusion that I'm sort of grading it based on these factors first, and then maybe showing the high grade areas with some symbology later. Some later, like low stress street, low stress street, but
All right. Ellie, did you have a question? I just was curious about how the findings will be, if there will be recommendations to how individual municipalities can incorporate the findings into local level plans.
Yeah, I can see, and we're developing the outline for that story map this week. I'm sure that's one of my things on my list this week. But we do see this as kind of a tool for municipalities, but I do think like a how to incorporate it would be great to include. But I'll think about that a little bit as we write it up this week. So we're not proposing projects. SBC sees this more as a resource for people doing their like local planning.
That's correct. And then also for each county in the city of Pittsburgh, we develop active transportation profile reports. So like those will also be updated as part of this plan update. We envision taking a lot of the data that generates, putting those things in our county report. That it will be static, not like the story map, but that might be useful for municipalities as well.
A lot of the questions we've been asking in a lot of the stakeholder meetings is how did you use the last plan? And a lot of people have said that they really use those profiles more than anything else. So I think we're trying to think about how to make this useful. So yeah, right now our vision is a story map. I could imagine a map appendix if we kind of just like something where you can click on all the maps that are like printable.
Along that line, Jeff Speck's book, Walkable City Rules, lays out a very workable, very doable set of ideas, given a set of principles. If you follow, and not that you would adopt those principles, but if you just look at the structure of that book, I think what you're talking about could very well fit into that kind of structure.
Yeah. Yeah. We've told the kind of how-to guide for other projects. I don't think we're getting into that level of detail here, but I can imagine just like, thinking about that a little bit.
Just as you develop the county profiles, can you set up a procedure so that they can take that same procedure down to the municipalities?
But just like, I mean, what's Kelly, I mean, are you going to have in there almost like resources for them to go to for some of the smaller municipalities? If they're like, I want to do an active transportation, what do I do? It's like Chris said, he is a municipality with staffing and resources. Small municipalities don't have that. And so they're going to look for that partner organization like up like Pittsburgh, or if it's trails, they're going to look for like us. Like, is that information that we can include to be like, these are trail groups in these areas. These are, active transportation groups or
we do have that kind of data, like existing trail groups and organizations identified in each county active transportation profile report. And then we do also have the active transportation resource center, which includes a lot of, it's not a how-to so much as it is a collection of resources. But instead of searching the web to find a design guide for building a bike facility, you can go to that resource center and find under that tab. But I don't know if that answered your question.
When you talk about that level of stress too, I keep thinking like as I've been building the trail, I think of just persons. Like people are like, we're trying to build a trail for family's sake, and then other people will say like, I wouldn't ride on that part, and people at different levels. That's when you're thinking about stress, and then we've met people in our meetings that like ride like crazy roads to work every day year round, and they're like, oh, this will be great. Like
you're right.
Like you're trying to provide it like
we want the most use.
Yeah. This is level of traffic stress. I do, and maybe we're not saying that all the time. It is level of traffic stress because I do think there are different stressors.
Yes.
I mean, I personally don't ride trails at night because I feel a little
Yeah.
isolated. And, which at night means 4 o'clock right now. So, like, I think there are definitely different types of stressors, and we have done projects that have accounted for that. For this project, we are looking at less level of traffic stress.
I was also Lydia, reached out to me in the States, and she has she's mapping she's mapping pedestrian vehicle hits.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. Like we're looking at like mid-block crossings in Ramona, some of these.
Yeah.
So so I said, yeah, send me more information. Yes, it is, if you use it as a tool to say, no, we need to make this crossing safer for
You mean pedestrian crashes?
crashes. Yeah. Interaction vehicles, right?
Yeah.
And she has a map for the whole county. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and this isn't, I would say, although we're not factoring crash history into this, it is, we do crash analyses and high risk analyses for other projects. And this is very similar to a high risk. I mean, there are more crashes on high speed, high volume streets, and especially vulnerable user crashes, bicycle pedestrians. So this does kind of highlight the high volume. It is kind of a high risk network, even though it's not.
It's it's hard to get people to understand too. Like we had a walk, Courtney and I had a bunch on Allegheny River Boulevard. We're going to take a lane, and people are like, the traffic's too fast, and this is dangerous. And it's like, yeah, no kidding. That's why we want to take a lane and slow it down. So trying to get people to realize that like people are actually opposed. Like, no, you can't do this. It's too dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that kind of analysis trying to say, no, try to lower the stress line. So, it's safer.
Yeah. And I would say that, there, FHWA, like a federal agency, does have a lot of resources if you want any tools for like talking about that with communities. Cause I think it is like a shift in how we're thinking. There are a lot of like traffic engineers who would still say it's more dangerous to have more narrow lanes and more, you know what I mean? They're
dying faster.
It's a big shift. So absolutely.
Right.
Or I think that was my speed. Or
I think that was great.
but yeah. But I think a lot of you are on our steering. So we'll see you next week.
Great.
Just talk about this.
Let's go this week's session. And
Yeah.
survey, another motion for those.
All that.
All right. All right. Well, thanks so much.
Yeah.
Presenting, Kristen.
Thank you.
Thanks to everyone for hanging in there. It's a long forum today, but like I said, we appreciate your joining us.
Great.
All right. Meeting adjourned.